So we are on Tezvav Days 15b. We're at the Mishnah. First, I want to dedicate today's class to the memory of my wife's grandfather. This is his first yahrzeit. Our youngest son is named after him, born a few weeks after he died. And his name is Yeshua ben Michal, a man who sat in jail in Russia for a couple of years. Yep, for being part of the Chabad network of keeping the Jewish underground alive. He spent a few years sitting in, I think it was 3, sitting in a Russian jail. Very special person. Lived till 96, 97. And went to work almost at the end of his life as a shochet, as a ritual slaughter. The halacha is you can't be a shochet after 70. You get too old. But he still would go there, he'd supervise, he trained hundreds of shachtim probably, I don't know. Anyway, fascinating man.
I forget what the law states. Is it one cut?
Yeah, you draw in.
So what happens in case there's a farmer? Let's say there's farmers in those days.
Yeah.
And they weren't very wealthy. And the farmer goes to shochet his cow, and first cut doesn't go well. So he cuts it again.
It's very tricky. It's very tricky, and at the end of the day, there's a lot of trust involved. You trust the people you're buying from, which is why we have the rabbinical supervision. That's the whole point of the rabbinical supervision.
This is for just a step.
Yeah, so you have, you don't have to go so far to a farmer. What happens if in your own home something falls into the wrong sink and you don't realize, and people have to know the laws, have to know when to ask questions to a rabbi, and you have to trust. And they have to trust. Sorry?
I've thrown out so much stuff.
So call me. I'll tell you when you have to throw out, when you can kosherize, how you kosherize. Call me. I'll let you know when these things come up. That's what they paid me to learn. Okay. So we're at the other part of the Sotah proceeding. The first part was the meal offering, which we discussed in detail. And now we begin to discuss the other part of the proceeding, which is the water that she drinks. First we talked about her arriving in Jerusalem, the whole procedure to bring her there. Then we described the meal offering, and now the drinking of the Sotah waters as described in the Torah. So it says like this: Haya maybe pili shel cheres. They would bring a earthenware cup of water, full of water, or an earthenware cup for water. And they would put inside this cup chatzi log mayim, half a log of mayim. A log is a measure. This is a half a log. I'm not sure what the relative rate of log to liter is. I'll have a look. Log to liter. One log equals a third of a liter. So half a log is 1.5 liter. Or sorry, no, it's a third. So it's not so much. This is a half a log. Okay. And this water would come min hakiyar, from the wash basin. Right. One of the items in the temple was a wash basin in which the priest would wash their hands and feet from every day. And they would take water from there because it's got to be holy water. And this is holy water. It's been consecrated by the fact that it's in the wash basin, which is one of the holy items in the temple. So they would take water from the wash basin. So Rabbi Yehuda says it was even less than half a log. It was revius, which is a quarter of a log, which is like a few ounces. And his reasoning is Shem Shemamayat Biksav, just as Rabbi Yehuda's view is later in the Mishnah, he's going to tell us that in his view, you try to minimize the amount of words you're writing on the text, which will be erased into the water. So likewise, so too, he requires less water. The first opinion was a half a log. His opinion was even less, a quarter of a log. And that's consistent with his opinion that there's less to write, less water. Okay. This is Rabbi Yehuda's This is a dispute here between Rabbi Huda and the original opinion. Now, Nichnas lahechel, he would enter into the literally the hechel, the sanctuary, I suppose. You can call it the sanctuary. It's like, the temple, as I mentioned earlier, goes from east to west, progressively more holy. So you have the Azara, the courtyard, and then you have the hechel, to the next level. So he would enter to the hechel, the kayin with the water. Upanali Yaminai, he'd go to his right. Makam Hayasham, and there was there a spot, Amal Amma, which is 1 Amma, 1 cubit by 1 cubit, square cubit. The Tabla Shashayish, and it was covered by like a tile of marble tile. The Tabas Hayakuaba, and there was a ring, a handle, attached to this cubit wide, square cubit marble tile. And so he would use that handle to lift up the marble. The Naital offering would take earth from under the marble. Right. So we're going to learn it's required that the earth come from that the earth mixed into the water come from the actual temple. So there's like a little tablet lifted up, and there's earth under there, and he poured into the water. And he would pour earth into the water, to the point that the earth covered the surface of the water. So it's not a huge amount, it's not a massive amount, right? It's either half a log or a quarter of a log, is not a lot. And Shenemar, in the verse which backs up this idea, is these 2 points: the fact that it has to come from the earth under the temple, as well as the fact that it's got to cover the water. Because the verse reads, Minna Afar, and from the earth, Asher Yiyah Bekarka HaMishkan, that's going to be on the floor of the sanctuary. So now we learn it's got to be on the floor of the sanctuary. Yikach HaKohen, the Kohen shall take, this is still a verse, the Nasan El Hamayim, and he should give it to the water. Now, from the fact that the verse doesn't say in the water, rather to the water, it seems as if, sorry?
It's bringing it close.
Right, but it's got to be brought to the water as opposed to in the water. So if it was in the water, we have to drop it and mix it till the earth is submerged within the water. But from that, it says to the water, it means that the earth actually has to cover the water. So it seems like you would sprinkle it and cover like a layer over the water. That's what it seems like it would be. Okay, so this is the end of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah gets into the Gemara now gets into a few details regarding the cup in which the water was filled. So the Mishnah told us that the cup was earthenware. So it elaborates the Gemara and tells us further. Tana, we've learned in Mishnaic age text. Pili shal cheres chadasha. It had to be a new earthenware vessel, not just any ordinary one, but a new one. Give Rabbi Shmuel, these are the words of Rabbi Shmuel. End of the Mishnaic age text. Asks the Gemara, my time with Rabbi Shmuel, what is Rabbi Shmuel's reasoning for saying that it has to be a new one? Where does he derive that from the verse? So says the Gemara, Gomar, he derived, Kli, the word Kli, which means a vessel, which appears in the verse here regarding the laws of the Sotah. It says that he shall put water into a Kli, into a vessel. And likewise, the word Kli, vessel, also appears in Mitzvah at the laws of the Mitzvah, at the purification process of the one who has the spiritual leprosy, the discoloration of the skin, as a result of spiritual affliction. The Mitzvah, the Tzaras. So over there, the verse also invokes this word, Kli, a vessel, with respect to slaughtering the bird, and the blood should fall into earthenware vessel. There it says that too. So the word Kli and Kli, the word vessel, appears in both places, and therefore derives some similarity between the two vessels. Specifically, Malahalan, just like when it comes to the vessel used in the proceedings of the Mitzvah. Chadasha has to be a new one. So Afkan, so too here, with respect to the proceeding of the Sotah, Cheres Chadasha has got to be a new earthenware. Okay. Now the obvious question is, Vahasan. Now there, at the laws of the Sotah, how do you know there it has to be a new one? You're assuming that when it comes to the Sotah, it's got to be a new one. And you're comparing the Sotah because of the association of the same word, Kli, that the Sotah also has to be a new one. Well, how do you know that the Sotah has to be a new one? It has to be a new earthenware vessel. So explains the Gemara, Shachat as Tzipar Achas, the verse describes the proceeding of the Sotah as follows. You shall slaughter the one of the two birds, Al Kli Cheres, into the earthenware vessel, Al Mayim Chayim, on, quote, living waters. Now, definition of living water is water that was not used before. Otherwise, it's worked water, not living water. Living water, or another way of translating living water, is natural water. So water that comes from a natural source and never been used for any other purpose other than what we're using it now. Therefore, Rabbi Yishmael argues, Ma mayim chayim, just as the verse describes with the law of the Sotah, that the water has to be living water, shaloi nas b'malacha, with which no work has ever been done. It's fresh water. So afkli. So too the vessel, which the verse describes just juxtaposed to each other. So too shaloi nas b'malacha, it's got to be a new vessel that has to be, that's just made, that was never used. So this is the logic, step by step. See, the Mishnah went with the conclusion and went back to the beginning. But let's go to the beginning and then come to the conclusion. The beginning is, the verse says, with respect to the law of the Sotah, that you have to have fresh water, no work. Now, in that very verse where it tells you to have fresh water, it also says that you have to have that fresh water inside a vessel. And therefore, because the two are described together, the vessel and the water are described together, then they also share similarities. And just like the water's got to be fresh, so too the vessel's got to be fresh, unused. And now we compare the Sotah law to the Sotah law. Now, if the Sotah law has to have a fresh vessel, so does the Sotah have to have a fresh vessel. So the Gemara asks, if we're going to compare the Sotah law to the Sotah law, then compare it all the way. Says the Gemara, therefore. Now, if the case is over there, with respect to the Sotah law, Mayim Chaim, it's got to be fresh water. Afkan Mayim Chaim, and so too here it should be fresh water. And we don't find a requirement that the Sotah water has to be fresh water. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yishmael, in Rabbi Yishmael's view, who is the one who argued that the vessel has to be fresh, Hachanami, he actually also requires that the water be fresh. How so? Because the Amr Rabbi Yechon taught us, Mei Kiyar, the waters of the wash basin in the temple, which is where we're deriving the water for the Sotah. That water, Rabbi Shmuel says, Mei Mayonhem, they are waters from a well, so they are fresh. So Rabbi Shmuel is consistent. In the Sotah, it says you got to have fresh water, and therefore he learned that the vessel also has to be fresh. And the Sotah does the same thing, a fresh vessel, just like the Sotah, and fresh water, because the water is coming from the kiyar. And Rabbi Shmuel's view is that the kiyar itself is fresh water because it's a well underground. But Chachamim, the sages are of the view that the kiyar, the wash basin, is not actually fresh, doesn't have to necessarily be fresh water. Mishar Meimais is collected from anywhere, from rain or from somewhere else. They put it there. So it's a man-made well, not an actual well. So the Chachamim are consistent as well. They don't expect new water, fresh water for the Sotah, nor do they expect a fresh vessel. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel goes fresh vessel and fresh water. And his fresh water is by dint of the fact that in his view, the kiyar itself is fresh water. Okay.
Just understand the difference between fresh water, running water, and pure water.
So fresh water means it was never manipulated by man. It comes directly from its natural source and put into your cup, as opposed to water that was used to wash the dishes and then put into your cup. Even if it wasn't used to wash the dishes, if you collect the rainwater and you put it into a receptacle, and then you put it in the refrigerator to keep it cold, that's considered water that's manipulated by man, rather than natural water. So just give an example. This is, I don't know if we're as extreme, maybe we are as extreme here. When it comes to a mikveh, right? So it's got to be natural water. So if you go to the ocean, you go to a river, it's natural enough. But there's no river here in MTC. How do we get our natural water down there? The rainwater. But in order for the rainwater to be valid, it has to make its way down to the mikveh without ever being held in a vessel. This thing that's held in a vessel, it goes in and it comes out, it's been manipulated by man. So it has to naturally run, without ever stopping, directly into the mikveh, the reservoir, which is attached to the mikveh, which I'm not going to get into how that works, the attachment part. But the point for us here is this idea that once it's trapped in a vessel, it's considered manipulated by man. So this water that's in the kiyar, is it naturally there anyway, which makes it fresh water? Or is it collected and then poured into that reservoir? If that's the case, it's manipulated by man. There's a dispute between Rabbi Shmuel and the sages. Sages say it doesn't matter, just collect water, put it there. Rabbi Yochanan says no, it's going to be fresh water. It's a well water, and because it's fresh water, therefore the Sotah water is fresh, and the cup is also fresh in his view. Just like the Sotah, where there it says specifically it's got to be fresh water and therefore fresh vessel. Whereas the sages say, look, leave Sotah out of it. Sotah has its own rules. Sotah does not have to have fresh water from the kiyar; it's not fresh. From the wash basin, it's not fresh. Number two, neither does the vessel have to be fresh, just any ordinary vessel. Okay. A few more lines. Actually, we'll stop over here because the Gemara is going to go to back and forth. Maybe we'll go through tomorrow.
Fresh water, do you run water from the stream?
So fresh water could be running water from a stream, but as long as it's not taken into a human receptacle in between. Once it's put into a human receptacle, it's already not considered fresh water. Yeah, that would be fresh water from mikveh. Yeah, it becomes actually a big question because let's say rivers that have dams could invalidate the river from mikveh, theoretically. It's not. It's a discussion that's discussed whether like a woman could use a mikveh in different rivers. Even say here in Montreal, you have dams up in the river. And to what degree does that count as man manipulated?
The dam is in the back river, not the St. Lawrence River.
Isn't there a dam further up in St. Lawrence?
There's a dam at that, you know.
That's at the canal. Right, but it goes through a canal that's man-made, right? So the St. Lawrence itself doesn't have a dam. Isn't there one closer
It's
to
got
it?
the locks.
Sorry?
It's got the locks. That's it. Ships have to go through locks.
Right, but those
So that invalid.
right, but the ships going through locks are on canals that are off the river, not in the actual river itself, isn't it?
Still the river water.
Right, but so then, right, because it flows back in. It's a good question. I don't know the answers to these questions per se, but I know that these questions are certainly discussed.
Amazing that we go through the locks.
Yeah.
Kids in the Michigan River.
Yeah.
Several locks there. You see
It's very cool to watch, but I wonder what the halachic ramifications are. I know that it's discussed. I don't know. I'm not proficient in all these laws, but I know that it's discussed amongst the.
Trapped, so it has to be.
Right, but the question is, once it mixes back into the natural river, does it go back to its original status of being natural because it's mixed back into the natural river, or does it ruin the state of the natural river? I really don't know. I'm not proficient enough in all these laws, but I know that it's discussed. Certainly, I know that the Montreal River is discussed as well. So right here, we rely on rainwater. We rely mostly on rainwater. But back in the old day, for the most part, they relied on rivers. And most towns and cities were built on rivers anyway, because that's where they got their power, hydropower, right? Not hydropower, they got their water mills, right? Anyway, okay, have a good day.